Listen, because this is the kind of public power play that doesn't need a microphone to explode. One missing chair, one silent no, and suddenly an entire room of people with money, influence, and ice-cold control turns a supposed royal moment into a humiliating lesson. You don't walk in uninvited and expect the front row to bend for you. And that's exactly what witnesses say happened at a high-profile philanthropic summit in New York. One of those glossy, curated gatherings where the guest list is practically a sacred text and every seat is a statement. Not just where you sit, but what you are worth in that room. Now here's where the story goes from awkward to brutal. According to multiple staff and attendees speaking anonymously, Meghan arrived at this summit not officially on the list, not the way the event is usually run, not the way the gatekeepers like it. And yet, she showed up with the posture of someone who believed the room would rearrange itself the moment she crossed the threshold, because the expectation wasn't subtle. The whispers say her team pushed last-minute contact, pressing for inclusion based on her global humanitarian profile. And the host, caught between diplomacy and disruption, reportedly did what people do when they don't want drama on the record. They accommodated her, but with conditions. Integrate her, don't elevate her, no changes to the seating, no changes to the speaking order, no disruption for the guests who were actually invited. That one instruction, it wasn't logistics, it was a boundary. And then, this is where everything cracked. After a keynote, Meghan and an aide reportedly moved toward the front row, the power zone, the seat of optics, the seat that says, "I belong here." Her staff indicated a specific chair reserved for a leading CEO who was temporarily away. In her mind, that empty chair looked like opportunity, like destiny, like obviously that's for me now. But the room didn't flinch. An event coordinator stepped in, polite, firm, controlled, the kind of calm that feels like a slap when someone is expecting deference. The coordinator reportedly told her the seat was taken and offered alternative seating toward the side. And witnesses described the exchange as tense and hushed, the kind of tight smile conversation where the jaw clenches but the face stays camera ready. Now picture this, a packed room, people sliding into their seats, conversations continuing, heads turning, then turning away, and Meghan reportedly standing there, waiting, expecting someone to do the "oh, of course, please right this way" routine. But nobody moved, nobody jumped up, nobody rushed in with a chair like, "Sorry, Duchess, this is unacceptable." No chair came, just time, long enough for it to stop being an accident and start being a message. And this is what makes it so savage. In elite rooms, they don't always confront you with words. They confront you with silence. They don't shout. They withhold. They don't throw you out. They make you feel like you don't exist until you shrink yourself into whatever corner they assign. Eventually, witnesses say she was guided to a less prominent location. But by then, the damage wasn't fixable, because the room had already watched the moment where she seemed to demand royalty in a place that doesn't run on monarchy. And let's be honest, this isn't about furniture. That chair became a symbol, a metaphor in real time, a withheld seat at the table, a quiet "you're not the center here." Because for years, the Sussex image has been built on a paradox that people are starting to side-eye harder and harder, walking away from working royal life while still expecting the world to treat them like the crown never stopped shining. Trading palace protocol for Hollywood platforms, but still wanting palace privileges when it suits the moment. And the New York philanthropic set? That crowd isn't impressed by titles like their magic spells. Their currency is impact you can measure, money you can trace, and credibility earned over time. In that world, Duchess isn't rank, it's a line on a bio, a conversation starter, maybe even a curiosity, but it's not a golden key. That's why insiders allegedly describe a growing fatigue, especially among American power brokers, toward what they see as constant narrative management. The victim-to-victory storyline, the public grievances, the high-gloss announcements that don't always match long-term, visible results. And when you walk into a room full of legacy philanthropists, people who built billion-dollar foundations and decade-long initiatives, your brand has to do more than sparkle. This is where the tension gets personal. Meghan's entire public journey has been framed as escaping a rigid institution. But the outside world isn't some wide-open stage where the spotlight is guaranteed. It's a maze of other institutions, Hollywood, publishing, philanthropy, each with its own gatekeepers. And those gatekeepers don't respond well to someone they perceive as trying to shortcut the hierarchy while insisting hierarchy shouldn't exist. The coldest detail? Witnesses said the room didn't rally to her defense. No collective outrage, no scramble, just averted gazes, tightened lips, and people continuing their conversations like nothing was happening. And if you understand elite culture, you understand what that means. They weren't shocked. They were done, because exile in these circles isn't always a dramatic ban. It's indifference. It's being treated like a complication, not a prize. And that's why this moment hit so hard. Not because she stood, not because she didn't get a chair, but because the room allegedly decided to let that moment linger long enough for the lesson to land. Your presence is tolerated. Your presumed privilege is not. Now, the question isn't whether this was an oversight. The question is whether it was a deliberate recalibration, an influential crowd quietly signaling that the era of automatic deference is over, and if you want a seat in these rooms, you'll have to earn it the way everyone else does. What happened next is where the whispers turned darker and far more revealing, because once that moment passed, once the chair incident quietly dissolved into forced smiles and redirected footsteps, the atmosphere around her reportedly changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just colder. Conversations didn't stop, but they stopped including. Introductions became shorter. Eye contact became optional. The kind of social temperature drop that tells you everything without saying a word. And here's the detail insiders keep circling back to: no one rushed to fix it afterward. No apology tour from the organizers. No follow-up reassurance. No sudden attempt to overcorrect. Which means, to people who understand power dynamics, that this wasn't viewed as a mistake that needed repair. It was viewed as a moment that had already said what needed to be said. Because in these spaces, especially American philanthropic and corporate circles, status isn't inherited. It's transactional. It's constantly reassessed. And the second someone believes you're asking for more than you're offering, the calculation changes. Sources claim that after the seating issue, several attendees who were expected to network with Meghan simply didn't. Meetings that might have happened never materialized. Casual follow-ups vanished into polite non-responses. Not hostile, not rude, just professionally absent. And that silence, that's the real shutdown. This is where the broader pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Over the past few years, Meghan's appearances have increasingly relied on expectation rather than invitation, assuming relevance based on narrative, not placement, assuming influence based on visibility, not endorsement. And in Hollywood-adjacent philanthropy, those assumptions can turn fatal to momentum, because influence here isn't declared, it's granted. And the unspoken verdict from that room, according to insiders, was simple: you can't keep invoking a title while rejecting the system that gave it meaning and expect new systems to replace it automatically. That's the contradiction people are quietly done entertaining, especially when many in that room have spent decades funding causes without press releases, without memoirs, without global interviews framing themselves as misunderstood heroes. To them, service isn't a storyline. It's receipts. It's longevity. It's showing up when cameras aren't guaranteed. And this is why the chair mattered so much. It wasn't about disrespect. It was about recalibration. Because once you leave the royal structure, you leave behind the invisible machinery that enforces your importance. Outside that world, no one is obligated to rearrange themselves around you. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. What reportedly rattled observers most wasn't that Meghan stood, it was that she waited, as if the correction would come, as if someone would realize the error and restore the hierarchy she believed still applied. But the correction never came. And when it didn't, the illusion cracked. Insiders said this moment has already circulated quietly among elite event planners and donors, not as gossip, but as caution. As an example of what happens when someone enters a room assuming reverence instead of building rapport, when branding outruns backing, when symbolism is mistaken for substance. And make no mistake, this doesn't mean doors are slammed shut forever. Power rarely works that way, but it does mean the terms are changing. The grace period is over. The benefit of the doubt is gone. From now on, every appearance will be measured, every demand weighed, every expectation silently judged. And here's the harshest truth of all: rooms like that don't enjoy humiliating anyone. They prefer neutrality. But when someone repeatedly forces the question of how important am I really, eventually the room answers, not with a confrontation, not with headlines, but with an empty space where privilege used to sit. So when people ask whether this was intentional or accidental, they're missing the point. Intent doesn't matter as much as outcome. And the outcome was unmistakable. The era of automatic accommodation is finished. No throne, no front row, no chair waiting, just a clear message delivered without a single raised voice. If you want a seat at this table, you're going to have to earn it, without invoking where you came from and without demanding what no longer belongs to you. And in the world she's trying to conquer now, that may be the most devastating lesson of all.